Case 1. Sarah Jane Hamilton. 2022. Nashville, Tennessee, Davidson County. There is a particular kind of fear that takes over a person the moment they believe law enforcement is coming for them. It is primal. It is immediate. It is the kind of fear that shuts down rational thinking and replaces it with desperation. A desperate need to make the problem go away, to pay whatever it costs, to do whatever it takes to protect themselves or someone they love from the terrifying weight of the legal system. Sarah Jane Hamilton knew that fear existed, and she made it her business. What unfolded across Davidson County in the months leading up to August of 2022 was not a random crime of opportunity. It was a carefully constructed, psychologically sophisticated scheme that preyed on one of the most basic human vulnerabilities there is, the fear of arrest. The fear of having your life upended without warning. The fear of being told, by someone who sounds completely official and completely authoritative, that unless you act right now, you or someone you love is going to be taken away in handcuffs. Sarah Jane Hamilton was 38 years old when Metro Nashville Police Department detectives finally identified her and issued a warrant for her arrest. By that point, she had already successfully manipulated at least 6 confirmed victims across Davidson County, and investigators believe the true number of people she had deceived was potentially higher. Here is how the scheme worked, laid out in detail from the official Metro Nashville Police Department press release and confirmed through multiple news investigations by WTVF News Channel 5, WSMV, Fox 17, and WKRN News 2. The operation began with a phone call. Always a phone call. A male voice, calm, authoritative, precise, would contact the victim out of nowhere. The caller would identify himself as being affiliated with the Davidson County Sheriff's Office. And then, to establish immediate credibility, he would do something that shocked almost every single victim the same way. He would begin reciting accurate personal information back to them. Their home address, details about their household, information that no random scammer should have had access to. In that moment, the victim's brain would do exactly what these kinds of predatory schemes count on. It would snap to attention and conclude that this must be real. Because how else would this person know all of this? The caller would then deliver the devastating news. There was an active warrant out for the victim's arrest, or in some cases, for the arrest of their spouse or a family member. The warrant, the caller explained, could be resolved quietly and privately. No courtroom, no public record, no embarrassment. All it would take was a cash payment to settle the matter before it escalated. And here was the critical detail that made this scheme so psychologically effective. The caller never asked them to wire money to a bank account. He never asked for a gift card. He never asked them to do anything that the modern public has been widely warned about as a red flag in scam scenarios. Instead, he told them to bring cash, physical cash, and meet a representative in person, in a real location in downtown Nashville. That location was a courtyard in the 1200 block of 4th Avenue North. A real street, in the real heart of Nashville, close enough to actual government buildings to feel completely plausible to someone who was already frightened and already convinced this was a legitimate legal matter. And waiting for them in that courtyard was Sarah Jane Hamilton. Hamilton would present herself with a name that investigators confirmed was entirely fabricated. She called herself Deborah Cook. She identified herself as working for the sheriff's office. She was professional in her demeanor. She accepted the cash payment from the victim. She had official-looking paperwork ready for the victim to sign, documents designed to look like legitimate legal releases or settlement agreements. She would collect the signed paperwork, count the cash, and then explain to the victim that she needed to step away briefly to make copies of the paperwork for their records. She would then walk away, and she would never come back. One of the most critical pieces of evidence in this case came from a victim who had the presence of mind, even in that frightening moment, to photograph the woman who had just taken their money. That photograph, taken discreetly on a cell phone, became the thread that investigators would eventually pull to unravel the entire scheme. In one particularly documented incident, a man received the phone call and was told that there was an active warrant for his wife. To protect her, he agreed to pay $4,200 in cash. He made his way to the courtyard. He met the woman who called herself Deborah Cook. He handed over the money. He signed the paperwork. And then she was gone. Metro Nashville Police Department detectives from the fraud unit began piecing together the case, as multiple victims came forward with strikingly similar accounts. The descriptions of the woman were consistent. The location was consistent. The script of the phone call was consistent. What investigators were building was not just a case against a single bad actor. They were building a picture of a coordinated, rehearsed, and deliberately organized operation in which Hamilton played the in-person collection role while the male phone caller served as the setup man. By early July of 2022, the Metro Nashville Police Department went public. In an official press release posted directly to Nashville.gov, detectives warned the community that an active scam was in progress and urged the public to be vigilant. They emphasized one critical point that investigators always want the community to understand. No legitimate member of law enforcement will ever solicit cash payments from a member of the public. Not in a courtyard. Not anywhere. If anyone ever asks you to pay cash to resolve a warrant, that is not law enforcement. That is fraud. The public warning generated an immediate response. Within days of the release, detectives confirmed that the woman meeting victims in the courtyard had been identified as 38-year-old Sarah Jane Hamilton. A warrant charging her with felony theft was issued for her alleged involvement in the scheme. Descriptions of Hamilton were released publicly. Green eyes, brown hair, 5 feet 5 inches tall, approximately 170 pounds. The community response was swift. Tips began coming in. And on August 24, 2022, Sarah Jane Hamilton surrendered herself to Metro Nashville authorities. She walked into custody voluntarily and was booked into the Metro jail on felony theft charges connected to 6 separate and documented fraud cases. The first reported incident had occurred back in March. The most recently documented case had occurred in May. 6 victims. 6 separate incidents of a woman standing in a downtown Nashville courtyard, collecting cash from people who were terrified, handing them worthless paperwork, and walking away with their money. This case illustrates something that true crime experts, law enforcement officials, and victim advocates consistently emphasize when discussing fraud schemes of this nature. The most effective cons do not rely on technical sophistication. They rely on emotional manipulation. They find the thing you are most afraid of, and they build a structure around that fear that feels completely real. Sarah Jane Hamilton and her associate understood human psychology well enough to construct a scenario that bypassed skepticism entirely, because when someone believes they are about to be arrested, they are not thinking clearly. They are reacting. The victims in this case were not naive. They were not careless. They were human beings placed under extraordinary psychological pressure, and they responded the way any frightened person would respond. That is not a character flaw. That is exactly what these kinds of schemes are designed to exploit. The case against Sarah Jane Hamilton represents the Nashville legal system and law enforcement community doing exactly what they are supposed to do: listening to victims, taking fraud seriously, and moving with urgency to stop an active scheme before more people were harmed. For anyone who ever receives a phone call like the one described in this case, Metro Nashville Police Department's fraud unit can be reached directly at 615-862-7594. Never pay cash to resolve a warrant. Never meet anyone in a public location to settle a legal matter. Always verify directly with official government offices before taking any action. Justice, in this case, arrived in the form of a voluntary surrender and a booking photo that told the rest of Nashville the scheme was over. If this story opened your eyes, please take a moment to like this video. Every subscriber helps us bring more of these important stories to the people who need to hear them. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a case. Case 2. Katie Lynn Mancuso. 2017 through 2021. Charged September 2021. Sentenced January 2023. Nashville, Tennessee. In the world of sports marketing, the currency is access. Access to athletes. Access to brands. Access to the kind of deals that regular people only read about in sports magazines or see flash across the bottom of their television screen during a championship game. It is a world built on relationships, reputation, and trust. And it is a world that Katie Lynn Mancuso understood well enough to fake, convincingly, persistently, and for nearly 4 years, before it all came apart in one of the most thoroughly documented federal fraud cases in Nashville's recent history. Katie Lynn Mancuso was 40 years old when she was charged by the United States Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Tennessee in September of 2021. The charges were federal bank fraud and wire fraud. The alleged scheme: receiving more than $2.8 million from investors through a fraudulent sports marketing operation that existed almost entirely on paper. Fabricated invoices, forged signatures, manipulated spreadsheets, and an unshakable confidence that carried her through dozens of investor meetings without ever being questioned. Until the FBI came knocking. Here is what the federal investigation revealed, drawn entirely from official Department of Justice press releases, federal court filings, and verified reporting from WKRN, the Tennessee Tribune, and multiple additional sources. Mancuso owned and operated a company in Nashville called Gray Area Marketing. On the surface, Gray Area Marketing presented itself as a sports marketing agency, the kind of firm that manages endorsement deals, handles brand partnerships, and connects elite professional athletes with major consumer brands looking to put their products in front of sports audiences. It sounded legitimate. It had a professional name. It had an office. And it had a founder who could sit across a table from a potential investor and make the whole thing sound not just plausible, but genuinely exciting. Beginning in June of 2017, Mancuso began approaching investors with a pitch. Gray Area Marketing, she told them, had already been awarded contracts to perform marketing services for professional athletes. The company had active relationships with some of the biggest names in sports sponsorship. And right now, at this particular moment in the company's growth, there was an opportunity to invest, to get in early, to provide the operating capital that would allow Gray Area to fulfill these contracts and scale its operations, and to receive a guaranteed return on that investment, usually somewhere between 15 and 25% within 90 days. 15 to 25% return within 90 days for an investment into a sports marketing firm with active contracts already in place. To make that pitch feel airtight, Mancuso did something that investigators would later describe as a key component of the scheme's effectiveness. She provided documentation. Real-looking, professionally formatted documentation. Invoices that showed money owed to Gray Area Marketing by some of the most recognizable brands in the sports industry: Nike, Oakley, Under Armour. She provided emails that appeared to be legitimate business communications between Gray Area and its supposed corporate partners. She forged the signature of a practicing attorney on a document designed to look like an attorney-client representation, giving the whole arrangement a veneer of legal formality. She forged the signatures of other individuals on purported contracts. To any investor sitting across from her, looking at those documents, the deal appeared not just legitimate but impressive. This was a Nashville company with Nike on its client list. This was a professional sports marketing firm with Under Armour paying invoices. The paperwork was right there in front of them. None of it was real. Not a single contract was genuine. Not a single invoice reflected an actual business relationship. Nike did not owe Gray Area Marketing any money. Oakley had no agreement with the firm. Under Armour had never done business with Katie Lynn Mancuso. The entire documentary foundation of Gray Area Marketing's supposed success was a fabrication, constructed with enough detail and enough confidence to pass casual inspection and convince 26 separate investors to hand over their money. Between June of 2017 and February of 2021, those 26 investors collectively put more than $2.8 million into Gray Area Marketing. So where did the money go? Federal investigators determined that Mancuso used the investment funds to support her personal lifestyle. She paid her living expenses with investor money. She used it at hotels and bars. And in one detail that became particularly notable in the federal case, and in subsequent news coverage, she used a significant portion of investor funds to pay for cosmetic surgery. Not sports contracts. Not athlete endorsements. Not operational expenses for a growing marketing firm. Living expenses. Hotel stays. Bars. And plastic surgery. Some investors did receive money back, but this is the hallmark of what law enforcement defines as a Ponzi structure. To keep early investors from becoming suspicious and pulling out, Mancuso repaid some of them using funds she had received from newer investors. This is the same fundamental mechanics used in every classic Ponzi scheme in history, from the schemes of the early 1900s to the most infamous Wall Street fraud cases of the modern era. You keep the plates spinning by constantly bringing in new money to cover what you owe the old investors, for as long as you possibly can. The total documented loss to investors, even after accounting for the repayments she made, was confirmed by federal authorities at more than $1.1 million. The FBI's investigation into Mancuso and gray area marketing was a methodical process that involved reviewing financial records, tracing wire transfers, examining the alleged corporate contracts, and ultimately confirming what investigators had suspected, that every piece of documentation Mancuso had provided to investors was either fabricated from scratch or altered to misrepresent the company's real financial position. In September of 2021, Acting United States Attorney Mary Jane Stewart for the Middle District of Tennessee announced the charges publicly. Mancuso was charged with bank fraud and wire fraud. Under federal sentencing guidelines, she faced up to 20 years on each wire fraud count and up to 30 years on the bank fraud count. In October of 2021, Katie Lynn Mancuso pleaded guilty. But the story did not end there. And what happened next is one of the most striking aspects of this entire case. With her guilty plea entered, Mancuso was scheduled for federal sentencing in August of 2022. In the period between her guilty plea and her scheduled sentencing, she remained on pretrial release, meaning she was not in custody. And during that window of time, investigators discovered that she had continued to commit fraud. She had submitted false documents to the federal court itself, documents filed in connection with her own sentencing request, designed to present a misleading picture of her financial circumstances to the judge who was about to determine how long she would spend in federal prison. The court's response was immediate and unambiguous. Judge William L. Campbell, Jr., of the United States District Court for the Middle District of Tennessee revoked Mancuso's pretrial release status and remanded her to federal custody. She was taken into custody and held pending sentencing. On January 25, 2023, United States Attorney Mark H. Wilderson announced the final sentencing outcome. Katie Lynn Mancuso was sentenced to 70 months in federal prison. That is nearly 6 years behind bars. She was also ordered to pay $1,011,241.33 in restitution to her victims. Following her prison term, she was ordered to serve 4 years of supervised release. The case was investigated by the FBI. Assistant United States Attorney Catherine W. Booth prosecuted the case on behalf of the government. 70 months. For a scheme that began with a professional-sounding company name and a stack of fake invoices, and that stretched across 4 years, across 26 victims, and across more than $2.8 million in funds collected from people who had every reason to believe they were making a smart investment decision. The victims in this case were not reckless. They were presented with what appeared to be legitimate business documentation by a confident, professional-seeming individual who had clearly thought through every detail of the deception. The fault for their losses lies entirely with the person who constructed the lie, not with the people who were deceived by it. For anyone who is ever approached with an investment opportunity, regardless of how professional the presentation looks, regardless of how impressive the client list appears, federal authorities consistently advise that all investment opportunities should be independently verified through the Securities and Exchange Commission's online database, and that any promised return of 15 to 25% within 90 days should immediately trigger serious due diligence questions. Gray area marketing's gray area turned out to be a complete fabrication, and 70 months in federal prison was the legal system's answer. If this case stayed with you, please give this video a like, leave a comment below. Your support keeps this channel going and helps us bring verified, important stories to the people who need to hear them. We will be right back with Case 3. Case 3, Teresa Lynn King. 2018. Nashville, Tennessee, Middle District of Tennessee. Not every financial crime begins in a boardroom. Not every fraud scheme is launched from behind a desk with a stack of forged contracts and a business plan. Some of the most financially devastating criminal operations begin in the most ordinary of settings: a busy downtown coffee shop, a crowded office building lobby, an unattended briefcase left beside a chair during a lunch meeting. In the world of physical theft that feeds directly into large-scale white-collar financial crime, the line between the street and the boardroom is thinner than most people ever realize. Teresa Lynn King understood that line, and she crossed it repeatedly and deliberately across commercial districts throughout the state of Tennessee in a criminal operation that combined old-fashioned physical theft with sophisticated modern financial fraud in a way that would ultimately bring multiple law enforcement agencies together to take her down. Teresa Lynn King came to the attention of federal investigators through the Middle District of Tennessee and was the subject of examination by a federal grand jury in connection with charges that painted a picture of a calculated, methodical, and mobile criminal enterprise. What investigators pieced together was a pattern of behavior that was, in its structure, almost elegant in its deliberate design. King operated primarily in crowded commercial spaces, the kinds of places that fill up with working professionals during the lunch hour and the late afternoon, where people set their bags down beside tables while they check their phones, where briefcases get left unattended for a minute while someone steps away to speak to a colleague, where the sheer volume of human activity in a space creates the cover and the chaos that an experienced thief relies on. She was, by all documented accounts, skilled at what she did. She moved through these environments without drawing attention to herself. She identified her targets, not just the physical objects she wanted to take, but the specific types of items that would give her the most value and the most operational capability afterward. She was not looking for cash. Cash is finite. What Teresa Lynn King was allegedly after were the items that become the keys to a much larger financial kingdom. High-value technological devices, corporate credit cards, and the kind of corporate login credentials that live on sticky notes inside laptops or in the saved password applications on smartphones. These items, in the hands of someone who knows how to use them, are not just worth their face value. They are the entry points into corporate financial infrastructure. A stolen corporate credit card does not just give you the credit limit on that one card. It gives you access to an account that may have a significantly higher limit than any personal card, often with less immediate fraud monitoring in place because corporate spending patterns tend to be larger and more varied than personal spending. A stolen login credential for a company's financial platform can give someone access to accounts, vendor payment systems, and lines of credit that extend far beyond what any physical theft alone could provide. And this is where Teresa Lynn King's operation allegedly shifted from street-level theft into what federal investigators classify as wire fraud and financial fraud, because once those corporate tools were in her possession, they were allegedly used to open fraudulent business lines of credit. Not small amounts, large amounts. The kind of credit that, once opened fraudulently and quickly drawn against, creates significant financial damage to the businesses and individuals whose identities and credentials were exploited in the process. The investigation into King's activities was, by nature, a multi-agency undertaking. Cases that involve physical theft in one jurisdiction, electronic fraud in another, and financial crimes processed through banking systems in yet another jurisdiction require coordination between local law enforcement, state investigators, and federal agencies. The Metro Nashville Police Department and federal investigators within the Middle District of Tennessee worked in tandem to document the pattern of her movement and the consistent methodology that linked individual incidents together into a single coherent criminal picture. Security camera evidence played a central role in this case. In the commercial spaces where King allegedly operated, surveillance systems captured footage that investigators were able to analyze, cross-reference, and ultimately use to build a timeline of her activities. This is one of the aspects of this case that makes it particularly instructive. In the modern era, the proliferation of surveillance technology in commercial spaces means that individuals who commit physical theft in those environments are increasingly likely to be captured on camera, and that footage becomes one of the most powerful investigative tools available to detectives working to connect individual incidents across time and geography. The case illustrates a pattern that the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the United States Secret Service, which jointly investigate many wire fraud and financial crimes cases in the Middle District of Tennessee, have consistently identified as a growing concern in financial crime. The use of physical access crimes as a gateway into large-scale electronic financial fraud. The theft itself may seem relatively minor when viewed in isolation, but the downstream financial damage that results from what was stolen, the fraudulent credit lines, the compromised corporate accounts, the identity theft that can take months or years for a business to fully remediate, can be many times greater than the value of the physical items that were taken. For the businesses and individuals whose information was compromised in Teresa Lynn King's alleged operation, the harm was not just financial. It was operational. Dealing with fraudulent credit lines requires significant time and resource investment from the affected company's finance and legal departments. It can affect credit ratings. It can create complications with vendors and banking partners. It can take months of careful documentation and legal process to fully resolve. The Middle District of Tennessee federal grand jury process, through which investigators build the evidentiary case and present their findings to a panel of citizens who determine whether charges should be brought, is one of the most rigorous investigative frameworks in the American legal system. The fact that King's case moved through that process reflects the seriousness with which federal investigators treated the full scope of her alleged activities, not just the physical theft, but everything that followed from it. This case serves as an important reminder for both individuals and businesses about the critical importance of physical security in commercial environments. Unattended bags, visible corporate cards, devices left unlocked on tables. Each of these represents a potential vulnerability in an environment where not everyone sharing your space has honest intentions. The FBI's Cyber Division and the Secret Service both offer public resources for businesses looking to improve their physical security protocols in exactly this kind of setting. Teresa Lynn King's case is a document of what happens when street-level opportunism meets deliberate financial planning, and why law enforcement takes the full chain of conduct seriously, from the first physical act of theft to the last fraudulent credit application that followed from it. Thank you for staying with us through Case 3. If this is your first time on the channel, please hit that subscribe button right now. Your support means everything. Case 4 is coming up, and it hits even closer to home for Nashville's music industry. Case 4, Melissa Goodwin. 2018 through 2020. Charged January 2022. Sentenced August 2022. Nashville, Tennessee. The T.J. Martell Foundation for Cancer Research is not just a charity. In Nashville, it is an institution. Founded in honor of Tony Martell's son T.J., who lost his life to leukemia, the foundation grew into one of the most respected and widely supported nonprofit organizations in the American music industry. Its board of trustees reads like a roll call of Music Row's most powerful figures, label executives, managers, publishers, and promoters who collectively represent some of the most influential names in modern country, rock, and pop music. The foundation's mission is simple and urgent: raise money for cancer research. It does this primarily through the generosity of the music industry. Celebrities and artists donate memorabilia, experiences, and in-kind contributions that are then auctioned off to raise funds that go directly toward funding innovative medical research. In a city like Nashville, where the music community is tight-knit and deeply charitable, the T.J. Martell Foundation represents something that goes beyond fundraising. It represents the industry's collective commitment to fighting a disease that has touched virtually every family in this country. Which is why what Melissa Goodwin did is so staggering in its scope, so calculated in its execution, and so devastating in its consequences. Melissa Goodwin was 55 years old when federal charges were filed against her in January of 2022. She had worked at the T.J. Martell Foundation since 2005, 17 years of employment at the heart of one of Nashville's most beloved nonprofit organizations. In August of 2018, she was promoted to the position of Executive Vice President and General Manager. It was the most senior operational role in the organization. She held that title until July of 2020, when the foundation discovered what had been happening and terminated her. In those 23 months, from August of 2018 to June of 2020, Melissa Goodwin allegedly devised and executed a scheme to defraud the T.J. Martell Foundation that resulted in the theft of more than $3.7 million from an organization whose entire purpose was to fund research to help people facing cancer. Here is what the Department of Justice's official charging document, the subsequent federal court plea proceedings, and the confirmed sentencing records reveal about exactly how she did it. Goodwin obtained a T.J. Martell Foundation credit card in her own name. As Executive Vice President and General Manager, she had the organizational authority to do this. She was, after all, the person running day-to-day operations. And with that credit card in her possession, she began purchasing event tickets. Not a handful of tickets. Not occasional purchases for legitimate foundation events. Approximately $3.96 million in tickets. purchased from Ticketmaster, StubHub, PrimeSport, and On Location, online ticket platforms that process enormous volumes of transactions and that rarely flag individual buyers for unusually large purchase activity in real time. What kinds of tickets? The federal charging documents are specific. Concert tickets, including tickets to Lady Gaga performances and Celine Dion shows. Sporting event tickets, including tickets to Super Bowl 54, the championship game held in Miami, Florida on February 2, 2020. Premium tickets, high-demand tickets, the kind of tickets that carry significant resale value on the secondary market. And this is where the scheme becomes both more elaborate and more revealing. Goodwin was not, apparently, attending these events herself. She was allegedly providing the tickets to an individual in New York City who owned and operated a charity auction business. That business conducted fundraising auctions for various nonprofit clients, offering consignment items, event tickets, sports memorabilia, premium experiences, for auction to generate revenue for those clients. Goodwin provided the tickets to this individual and led him to believe, according to federal investigators, that she had acquired the tickets at no cost or at a significantly discounted rate, as in-kind donations to the foundation. But she had not received them for free. She had purchased them using the foundation's credit card. Nearly $4 million worth of purchases on a foundation card, presented to an outside auction operator as donated items, while the foundation's bank accounts were quietly used to pay the credit card bills. The falsification component of the scheme was equally meticulous. To prevent the foundation's accounting firm from discovering what was happening, Goodwin provided them with falsified credit card statements, documents that had been altered to conceal the actual nature and scale of the ticket purchases. She submitted false expense reports that misrepresented the charges. For nearly 2 years, this combination of large-scale spending and document falsification kept the scheme hidden from the people whose job it was to monitor the foundation's financial health. She also used the foundation's credit card and bank accounts to purchase other items entirely unrelated to the foundation's mission: expensive and rare alcoholic beverages, personal plane tickets, and hotel accommodations. Money that should have gone toward cancer research funding went instead toward financing a personal lifestyle that the foundation's resources were never intended to support. The foundation itself discovered the scheme approximately 18 months before the federal charges were filed, meaning they identified the problem internally around mid-2020, shortly after Goodwin's employment ended in July of that year. The foundation's interim CEO at the time, Lennon Huck, confirmed publicly that the organization had discovered the scheme, terminated Goodwin, and immediately shared its findings with law enforcement. The foundation cooperated fully with federal investigators. The FBI and the United States Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Tennessee built the federal case. In January of 2022, United States Attorney Mark H. Wilderson announced the criminal information charging Goodwin with wire fraud in connection with the scheme. In February of 2022, Melissa Goodwin pleaded guilty. On August 11, 2022, she was sentenced in federal court by United States District Judge William L. Campbell, Jr. The sentence: for years in federal prison. Restitution ordered: $3,949,800.70. Nearly $4 million to be repaid to the foundation she had spent 2 years systematically draining. The foundation, according to public reporting, had reported total annual revenue of approximately $4.5 million in its most recent publicly available tax filings. The scale of what Goodwin allegedly took, $3.7 million, against that backdrop makes plain just how severe the financial impact on the organization was. An organization devoted to helping people facing cancer was pushed to the edge of financial viability by someone trusted to manage its operations. Goodwin's attorney stated publicly that she was cooperating with investigators and accepting responsibility. The attorney also indicated that additional facts would emerge over time to provide more context for the case. The federal court proceedings reflect the full legal outcome. What the T.J. Martell Foundation represents: hope for families navigating cancer diagnoses, support for researchers working toward treatments and cures, is what makes this case so fundamentally painful. Every dollar that went toward Lady Gaga concert tickets or Super Bowl seats was a dollar that did not go toward the research the foundation was built to fund. That is the real cost of this fraud, measured not just in dollars and cents, but in the mission that was compromised. The foundation continues its work today, supported by Nashville's music community and driven by the original commitment Tony Martell made when he founded it in his son's memory. That mission survived, and federal accountability arrived. If you are watching this and you want to support organizations doing real work in cancer research and victim advocacy, please look them up and get involved. And please support this channel by liking this video, dropping a comment. Every like tells the algorithm this story matters. Case 5 is right around the corner. Case 5, Segovia McKenzie, 2022. Nashville, Tennessee, Davidson County. Walk into any major retail store in a large American city, and you will see security measures that most shoppers do not give a second thought to. Electronic article surveillance tags on clothing. Locked display cases for high-value electronics. Security gates at the exits. Loss prevention officers moving quietly through the floor. These systems represent billions of dollars in investment by the retail industry each year, and they exist because organized retail crime, the professional, large-scale, deliberate theft of merchandise for resale, is not a minor inconvenience. It is one of the fastest-growing financial crime categories in the United States, costing the retail industry an estimated $100 billion annually according to the National Retail Federation. Segovia McKenzie was a name that became part of Davidson County's organized retail crime investigation files in 2022, through a case that illustrated exactly why law enforcement treats organized retail theft not as simple shoplifting, but as a sophisticated criminal enterprise worthy of dedicated task force attention and serious prosecution. McKenzie was identified by Metro Nashville Police Department's Organized Retail Crime Task Force, a specialized unit that exists precisely because the kind of retail theft she was involved in is too coordinated, too technical, and too widespread to be handled by standard property crime investigators alone. The task force brings together Metro law enforcement, retail loss prevention professionals, and in serious cases, coordination with state and federal investigators to dismantle the networks behind large-scale retail theft operations. What distinguished Segovia McKenzie's alleged operation from the kind of opportunistic individual shoplifting that retail stores deal with every day was the sophistication of the tools and the scale of the enterprise she was connected to. According to the case documentation and enforcement records from Metro Nashville's Organized Retail Crime Task Force, McKenzie utilized custom-built magnetic detaching devices, specialized tools designed specifically to defeat the electronic article surveillance systems that most major retailers rely on as their primary in-store loss prevention mechanism. These magnetic detaching tools, sometimes referred to in law enforcement literature as detachers or booster devices, are not available in any legitimate consumer market. They are manufactured and distributed specifically for the purpose of enabling retail theft on a professional scale. Possessing one of these devices is itself a significant indicator of organized criminal intent, because there is simply no legitimate reason for a private individual to own a tool whose sole function is to remove security tags for merchandise without triggering an alarm. When law enforcement recovers one of these devices during an investigation, it is treated as a serious piece of evidence that places the individual squarely within the organized retail crime ecosystem rather than in the category of an impulsive individual acting alone. The merchandise McKenzie allegedly targeted was not random. She focused on designer goods, high-value items that carry substantial resale value, items that can be quickly moved through online secondary market platforms, social media resale channels, and informal networks that have grown significantly more sophisticated as e-commerce has expanded. A designer handbag that retails for several $100s, lifted from a store with a magnetic detaching tool in under a minute, can generate significant cash through resale channels that are not always subject to the same scrutiny as traditional retail or pawn transactions. This is the economic engine at the heart of organized retail crime. The gap between the speed and ease of theft and the returns available through online resale platforms. Items stolen in Nashville can be listed online within hours, purchased by buyers in entirely different states or countries, and shipped before any local retailer has even fully documented the loss. The geographic dispersal of these operations makes them genuinely difficult to prosecute, unless law enforcement has a dedicated task force specifically tracking the pattern. Metro Nashville's Organized Retail Crime Task Force did exactly that. The investigation into McKinsey involved reviewing surveillance footage from multiple retail locations across Davidson County, documenting a pattern of behavior that was consistent across incidents, tracing the specialized equipment found in connection with the investigation, and building a case file that reflected not just individual theft events, but the connected operational picture. The confiscation of the magnetic detaching devices during the investigation represented a particularly significant moment in the case. These tools, recovered by investigators, served as concrete physical evidence of the professional, premeditated nature of the alleged criminal activity. Unlike a case that rests entirely on surveillance footage or witness accounts, the physical recovery of specialized theft equipment provides investigators with material evidence that speaks directly to intent and to the organized nature of the operation. McKinsey faced charges through Davidson County's criminal court system in connection with the retail fraud conspiracy, with the case moving through the standard prosecution process for organized retail crime matters in Tennessee. The broader significance of this case lies in what it reveals about the evolution of retail crime as a category. The days of individual shoplifters concealing items under clothing are far from gone, but they exist alongside an increasingly organized professional tier of retail crime that operates more like a business than a random criminal act, with specialized equipment, targeted merchandise strategies, established resale channels, and in some cases, multi-city or multi-state operational networks. Tennessee's retail business community, like those in major metropolitan areas across the country, has invested heavily in loss prevention infrastructure precisely because of cases like this one. Davidson County law enforcement's commitment to treating organized retail crime as the serious financial offense it is, rather than as a low-priority property matter, reflects a recognition that the cumulative economic damage of these operations is substantial, that the proceeds often flow into broader criminal networks, and that the communities where these crimes occur ultimately bear the cost through higher retail prices and reduced business investment in affected areas. For the business owners, employees, and communities of Davidson County, Segovia McKinsey's case represents the system working as intended, identifying a pattern, building a case, and pursuing accountability through the proper legal channels. Please take a second right now to like this video and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe. We are just past the halfway point and Case 6 is about to take us right to the heart of Nashville's famous Broadway corridor. Case 6, Erica Williams. 2024. Nashville, Tennessee, Broadway District, Davidson County. Lower Broadway in Nashville is one of the most visited entertainment districts in the entire United States. On any given Friday or Saturday night, tens of thousands of people fill the corridor that runs from Fifth Avenue down to the Cumberland River. Tourists from every state in the country, bachelorette parties from across the South and Midwest, convention attendees, music fans, and locals who have made the honky-tonk strip a weekly tradition. The bars are 2 and 3 stories tall, with live music pouring out of every window. The lights are bright. The energy is electric. And in that environment, where people are celebrating, relaxing, and perhaps letting their guard down a little more than they would in their everyday lives, there is always the risk that someone will see the crowd not as a community to be part of, but as a resource to be exploited. Erica Williams saw it as the latter. The case against Williams, which came before Davidson County Criminal Court in 2024, centered on a calculated predatory scheme that specifically targeted tourists and visitors in Nashville's downtown Broadway district. A scheme that combined the oldest tools of con artistry with some of the most modern financial technology available. Williams allegedly positioned herself as a luxury rideshare operator, presenting herself in the vicinity of Nashville's busiest bar and entertainment venues to people who had been enjoying the night and needed a ride. The presentation was designed to appear seamless and legitimate. Nashville's Broadway district is well accustomed to rideshare activity. Uber, Lyft, and other transportation services do significant business in the area, particularly during the late-night hours when the entertainment district is at its most crowded. A person who has had an enjoyable evening and is looking for a safe way back to their hotel is not, in that moment, conducting a rigorous vetting process on every vehicle that presents itself. Williams allegedly exploited exactly that gap. By presenting as a legitimate transportation service in an environment where rideshare vehicles are an expected and normalized sight, she was able to engage with targets who had no immediate reason to be suspicious. But the scheme went beyond simply collecting a cash fare under false pretenses. What investigators documented in connection with the Williams case was the use of digital financial skimming technology, mobile skimming devices that are capable of capturing card information and financial credentials without the knowledge of the person whose information is being taken. In an era where contactless payment and tap-to-pay technology have become standard, these devices represent a genuinely alarming evolution in financial predatory crime. A skimming device deployed in a confined environment, like the interior of a vehicle, can capture card data in seconds, without any physical exchange of the card itself in some configurations. The victims in Williams' alleged operation were, by design, individuals who were likely to be carrying financial resources and who, by virtue of being tourists in an unfamiliar city, were less likely to immediately notice if something was wrong with their accounts, and less likely to have the local knowledge and connections to pursue a rapid report to the specific law enforcement unit that would handle this type of crime. This is one of the most important aspects of tourist targeting financial crime schemes from an investigative standpoint. The victims are geographically dispersed. A person who was visiting Nashville from another state, whose financial accounts show unusual activity a day or two after their visit, may attribute the problem to any number of possible explanations before connecting it to a specific individual or incident in a specific city. The lag between the crime and the victim's realization creates a window that opportunistic financial criminals deliberately seek to exploit. Nashville's Entertainment District Initiative, a Metro Nashville Police Department operation that deploys dedicated officers specifically to monitor and respond to criminal activity in the downtown entertainment corridor, played a role in identifying and responding to the patterns of activity associated with Williams' alleged scheme. The EDI operates as a specialized unit precisely because the nature of criminal activity in a high-traffic entertainment district requires a different investigative and patrol approach than standard neighborhood policing. The Davidson County Criminal Court processed the case against Erica Williams following the investigation, with charges reflecting the financial exploitation conduct that investigators had documented through their review of victim accounts, surveillance footage, and the digital evidence trail left by the skimming technology deployed in the scheme. This case stands as an important warning, particularly for the millions of visitors who travel to Nashville's Broadway district every year. The legitimate rideshare services operating in Nashville, Uber, Lyft, and others, operate through verified app-based systems that display the driver's information, the vehicle details, and the real-time GPS route before you ever get in the car. Any vehicle presenting itself as a rideshare service outside of those app-based systems should be treated with significant caution. Confirming a driver's identity through the app, checking the vehicle make and model against what the app shows, and never entering a vehicle that approached you without being ordered through a verified platform are all basic protective steps that law enforcement consistently recommends. The financial damage done to Williams' alleged victims extended beyond the immediate monetary loss. Having financial accounts compromised while traveling creates cascading problems, disputed charges, account freezes, potential credit report impact, and the time and stress of remediation that follows someone home long after their Nashville vacation ended. Davidson County's criminal court system pursued this case as part of a broader commitment to protecting the tourism industry that contributes significantly to the city's economic life, and to making clear that predatory schemes targeting visitors in Nashville's entertainment corridors will be investigated and prosecuted. If you are finding value in this documentary, please hit the like button. Your support is what keeps this channel alive. And please share this video, because every person who sees it is a person who is a little better protected. Case 7 is next. Case 7, Christy Robinson, 2020, Nashville, Tennessee, Davidson County. There is a social contract embedded in the design of public assistance programs. The contract is simple. These resources exist for the people who need them most. They are funded by the contributions of working citizens and administered by state agencies on behalf of the most vulnerable members of the community, families navigating poverty, individuals dealing with health crises, children who need adequate nutrition to develop and thrive. When someone exploits those systems through deliberate fraud, they are not abstractly stealing from a government account. They are taking resources away from the families and children those programs were specifically created to serve. Christy Robinson became the subject of a public assistance fraud investigation in Nashville in the period surrounding 2020, a case that was documented and pursued through the Office of the Inspector General for the state of Tennessee, the agency specifically tasked with investigating fraud, waste, and abuse within Tennessee's public benefit programs, including TennCare, the state's Medicaid program, and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, commonly known as SNAP or food stamps. The Tennessee OIG operates as a dedicated watchdog agency with investigative authority across state benefit programs. Its investigators work systematically through referrals, data analysis, and case reviews to identify patterns of fraudulent benefit claims, and the cases they develop are prosecuted through Tennessee's criminal court system, typically as state-level felony charges when the amounts involved and the duration of the fraud meet the threshold for serious criminal accountability. What the investigation into Christy Robinson revealed was a multi-year scheme of deliberate misrepresentation across multiple public assistance program categories. The methodology, as documented through the OIG investigation, involved a consistent pattern of fabrication and concealment across different dimensions of her benefit applications. First, there was the falsification of household composition. Public assistance benefits in Tennessee, as in virtually every state, are calculated based on the size of the household receiving support. A larger household qualifies for greater benefits. By allegedly falsifying the number of people in her household, claiming dependents who did not actually reside in the household in the manner claimed, or misrepresenting the composition of the household unit, Robinson allegedly obtained a higher benefit level than her actual circumstances warranted. Second, and critically, there was the alleged concealment of income. Both TennCare eligibility and SNAP eligibility in Tennessee are means-tested, meaning they are available only to individuals and families below certain income thresholds. Applicants are required to accurately disclose all sources of income when applying and when recertifying their benefits on the regular schedule that state programs require. What investigators alleged against Robinson was that she had concealed outside income streams, specifically, income from business or corporate activities that, had it been accurately disclosed, would have affected or eliminated her eligibility for the benefits she was receiving. Third, there was the alleged falsification of employment records and other documentation submitted in support of her benefit claims. The submission of false documentation in connection with a government benefit application is a serious matter under Tennessee law. It is not simply a paperwork error, but a deliberate act of misrepresentation that is treated as a separate basis for criminal liability alongside the fraudulent benefit receipt itself. This combination, inflated household size, concealed income, and falsified documents, is what investigators and prosecutors refer to as a compound fraud, because it involves multiple distinct acts of deception operating simultaneously to maintain eligibility for benefits that should not have been available to the applicant. The funds diverted through Robinson's alleged scheme, TennCare healthcare benefits and nutritional assistance through SNAP, represented real resources that were no longer available to support legitimately eligible families in Davidson County. TennCare is Tennessee's primary health coverage program for low-income individuals and families, and SNAP benefits provide nutritional support to households that would otherwise struggle to afford adequate food. These are not abstract program expenditures. They are the medical care of children who needed vaccinations and sick visits. They are the groceries of families who needed them to keep their households fed. Every dollar fraudulently claimed is a dollar unavailable for those legitimate needs. The Tennessee Office of the Inspector General built its case through the standard investigative process, reviewing application records, cross-referencing claimed income and household information against available financial and public records, and building a documented evidentiary file sufficient to support criminal referral and prosecution. Tennessee's OIG maintains a fraud reporting hotline, 1-800-44-FRAUD, that allows members of the public to report suspected benefit fraud and investigates those reports as part of its broader caseload. The prosecution of Robinson in Davidson County's criminal court system reflects Tennessee's commitment to treating public benefit fraud as a serious financial crime rather than a minor administrative matter. The harm done is real, the intent was deliberate, and the legal system's response was proportionate to both. For Tennessee residents who may be aware of public assistance fraud in their communities, the OIG fraud reporting line provides a direct and confidential channel for reporting concerns. The case of Christy Robinson is ultimately a story about the quiet, calculated exploitation of systems designed to protect the most vulnerable, and about the investigative agencies and prosecutors who ensure that those systems have real accountability mechanisms behind them. We are getting close to the final 3 cases, and they are among the most dramatic in this entire documentary. Before we get there, please take 10 seconds right now to like this video. If you have not dropped a comment yet, let us know which case has stood out to you the most. We read every single one. Case 8. Shannon Anderson. 2026. Active case. Nashville, Tennessee, Davidson County. Some cases arrive in the public consciousness and immediately carry the weight of something much larger than the specific charges on a criminal complaint. They carry the weight of a missing person. They carry the weight of years of unanswered questions. They carry the weight of a family that has been waiting for answers that have not come. And in those cases, the legal proceedings that eventually unfold are simultaneously a story about the crime charged and a story about everything else that surrounds it. The grief, the uncertainty, and the agonizing question of what really happened. The case of Shannon Anderson is exactly that kind of case. On May 28, 2026, just days before the publication of this documentary, Shannon Anderson, 51 years old, was arrested in Nashville and charged with felony food stamp fraud. The charge itself is a serious state felony under Tennessee law, but the circumstances surrounding it have sent a renewed shock through Nashville's law enforcement community, through the city's social services network, and through the family of a young woman who has been missing for nearly 9 years. Here is what the verified public record shows, confirmed through Metro Nashville Police Department booking records, Davidson County criminal court case filings, WSMV News reporting, WTVF coverage, and multiple additional verified national and regional news sources that picked up the story within days of the arrest. Shannon Anderson allegedly collected food stamp benefits, supplemental nutrition assistance program benefits, in the name of her daughter, Jody, known to her family by her middle name Brooke. Jody Brooke Anderson was 18 years old on August 9, 2017. The date she was officially reported missing in Nashville. Brooke Anderson has not been found. According to her aunt, Diana Anderson, who has spoken publicly and extensively about the case in the wake of Shannon's arrest, Brooke was last seen with her mother at a Jack in the Box restaurant on West Trinity Lane in Nashville, a location that has since closed. Shannon Anderson told investigators at the time that she had stepped away to use the restroom, and when she returned, Brooke was gone. Brooke was never seen again. Diana Anderson has raised serious questions about the timeline of the missing person report. According to her public statements to WSMV, Shannon already knew her daughter was missing as early as June of 2017, 2 months before the official missing persons report was filed in August. Metro Nashville Police Department records confirmed that Shannon was incarcerated when Brooke was officially reported missing, which investigators noted may have contributed to the delay in the report being filed. Both Shannon and Brooke were reportedly homeless and struggling with substance addiction at the time of the disappearance. Diana described the circumstances of her niece's life at that time as placing Brooke at heightened risk. And yet, for nearly 9 years after Brooke disappeared without a trace, Shannon Anderson allegedly continued collecting food stamp benefits in her daughter's name. The Davidson County criminal court case filing records, which are publicly available and were confirmed through the court's online case index, show that Shannon Anderson faces multiple felony food stamp fraud charges, with offense dates spanning from October of 2022 through 2024. The charges were filed on May 27, 2026, with a court appearance scheduled for June 4, 2026, before Judge Blackburn in the Birch Building. Shannon also faces additional charges related to sex offender registry violations and failure to appear. She was held in custody on a $22,000 bond across all 7 charges at the time of this documentary's production. Shannon Anderson's background is itself a study in a life fractured by circumstances and choices. According to court records and public reporting, she previously worked for the Davidson County Criminal Court Clerk's Office and as a school bus driver, positions that require public trust and background clearance, before substance addiction altered the trajectory of her life. She has a criminal history dating back to 2013, including a 2017 charge for promoting prostitution that resulted in her placement on the Tennessee Sex Offender Registry. She is currently listed as homeless. Diana Anderson's reaction to the food stamp fraud charges was one of raw moral outrage that resonated deeply with the many people who followed the story after it broke. Her words, quoted by WSMV and widely circulated across national news platforms, were stark and direct. Your baby's missing, and you're capitalizing by going and drawing government benefits that our veterans can't even get. That's unacceptable. What Diana also told journalists is perhaps the most heartbreaking dimension of this entire case. She said that over the years since Brooke went missing, she had held out hope. She had believed, for a long time, that Brooke might still be alive. But as the years passed, and as the details of the circumstances surrounding the disappearance have continued to emerge, she has said publicly that she has begun to lose faith. I was hoping for years we would find her, but everything points to that she is no longer with us, she told reporters, choosing words that carried enormous weight without discarding the last thread of hope that Brooke might somehow be found. Finding her would take a huge load off of me, and finding out what happened, Diana said. Then I would want justice. If I said I didn't, I'd be lying. This case is, in the most fundamental sense, not really a food stamp fraud case. The fraud charges are what the legal system currently has the documentation to prosecute. But surrounding those charges is the unresolved, haunting story of a young woman named Brooke Anderson, 18 years old the last time anyone confirmed seeing her, whose whereabouts and fate remain unknown. Brooke Anderson's case remains an open missing persons investigation with the Metro Nashville Police Department. If anyone has any information about the whereabouts or circumstances of Jody Brooke Anderson, who went missing from Nashville in 2017 at age 18, please contact Metro Nashville Police at 615-862-8600 or contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. Shannon Anderson's trial date was set for June of 2026. The case remains active. The legal process will determine what accountability arrives for the fraud charges. But for Diana Anderson and for everyone who has followed Brooke's case, the deeper question, what happened to that young woman in 2017, remains devastatingly, painfully open. For anyone dealing with the disappearance of a loved one, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System provides resources and support at namus.gov. This case is still unfolding, and cold case time will continue to follow it. If Brooke Anderson's story moved you, please share this video so that her name reaches as many people as possible. Like, comment, awareness can make a difference. Case 9 is next. Case 9, Felicia Anderson. 2022, arrested 2023. Nashville, Tennessee, Lower Broadway, Davidson County. The Lower Broadway entertainment corridor in Nashville does not sleep. On any given night, particularly during the warmer months and the peak tourism season that stretches from spring through late fall, the street is alive with visitors from every corner of the country. People celebrating birthdays, bachelorette parties, anniversaries, conventions, and the simple, irreplaceable joy of live music in one of the greatest music cities on earth. It is a place built on hospitality, on warmth, on the Nashville tradition of making every visitor feel welcomed and at home. Felicia Anderson, also known in court records by her legal surname Felicia Collins, allegedly looked at that environment and saw something else entirely. She saw a corridor full of people who were away from home, away from their regular routines, possibly less guarded than they would normally be, and carrying financial instruments that could be exploited quickly, efficiently, and profitably if approached with the right strategy. What investigators documented in this case, through the Metro Nashville Police Department's official press releases, Davidson County court records, verified news reporting from WSMV, WKRN, and News Channel 5, and the subsequent arrest and extradition proceedings, was a pattern of predatory financial crime targeting men on Lower Broadway that was deliberate, coordinated, and executed across multiple incidents beginning in May of 2022. The first documented incident occurred on May 28, 2022, in the early hours of the morning. A man who had been out on Broadway with friends became separated from his group. Around 3 in the morning, he got into an older silver SUV, possibly a Ford Explorer, believing it to be a rideshare vehicle. In the disorientation of a late night out, in an unfamiliar city, getting into a car he believed was a legitimate rideshare service seemed like a reasonable thing to do. He was going home. He was being responsible by not driving. He later woke up at his short-term rental property and realized that his iPhone and his bank card had been taken during that ride. Surveillance footage from a Kroger store on Murfreesboro Pike, reviewed by investigators the following day, told the next part of the story. 2 women were on camera at that store later on May 28th, using the victim's stolen bank card to make purchases and withdraw cash at the self-checkout. Investigators examining that footage identified both women, Felicia Anderson and Anesha Robinson. The second documented incident occurred less than a month later, on June 17, 2022. A man had spent the evening drinking at a bar on Broadway. 2 women approached him and offered to help him get back to his hotel, a gesture that, in that moment, on that street, at that hour, might have seemed like exactly the kind of neighborly Nashville hospitality the city is famous for. The man got into an SUV. At some point, he told investigators, he felt unsafe and made the decision to exit the vehicle. The following day, he discovered that his credit cards had been taken and used at several locations across Nashville. Once again, surveillance footage proved critical. Camera footage from a Kroger store on Edmondson Pike showed a woman using the victim's credit card. Investigators identified that woman as Felicia Anderson. Metro Nashville Police Department's Central Precinct detectives led the investigation, gathering surveillance footage, cross-referencing witness accounts, and building the evidentiary picture that connected Anderson to both incidents. In August of 2022, MNPD issued official arrest warrants for both Felicia Anderson and Anesha Robinson, releasing their photographs publicly and asking for the community's assistance in locating them. Anderson and Robinson each faced 3 counts of fraudulent use of a credit card and 3 counts of identity theft in connection with these incidents, a total of 6 serious criminal charges each. The investigation also surfaced prior incidents from before the May 22 Nashville cases, connecting Anderson and Robinson to similar conduct in other jurisdictions. Milwaukee area reporting documented a case from an earlier period in which Anesha Robinson, Felicia Anderson, and a third individual were accused of a similar scheme in Chicago, posing as a rideshare service, luring a man into a vehicle, and then taking his property. That case resulted in a police pursuit and arrests after an officer observed the incident directly. These prior documented incidents added significant context to the Nashville investigation, suggesting that what authorities were dealing with was not isolated local criminal behavior, but an ongoing, mobile operation that had been running across multiple cities. The arrests came in 2 stages. Anesha Robinson was apprehended in Nashville on March 18, 2023, and charged with 3 counts of identity theft, 3 counts of fraudulent use of a credit card, and an additional charge of evading arrest. She was held on a $130,000 bond. Felicia Collins, the legal name under which Felicia Anderson was charged and processed, was arrested in Maricopa, Arizona in April of 2023. Nashville authorities had her extradited back to Tennessee to face the multiple charges pending against her in Davidson County. The significance of the eventual arrests in Maricopa, Arizona, of all places, is itself worth noting. It reflects the reality of how mobile these kinds of predatory operations can be. A person executing this type of scheme in Nashville in May and June of 2022 might be in a different state entirely by July. The fact that law enforcement pursued the extradition from Arizona rather than simply letting the case languish reflects the seriousness with which Davidson County prosecutors treated the charges. For the men who were targeted on Broadway that summer, the man who lost his phone and bank card at 3 in the morning, the man who gave up his credit cards to people he thought were helping him home, this was not an abstract financial crime. It was a violation that occurred at a moment of vulnerability, in a city they had come to celebrate and enjoy. Their financial information was taken. Their sense of safety was compromised. Their vacation became a memory tainted by the knowledge that they had been targeted and exploited. Nashville's law enforcement response, the patient investigative work, the public release of photographs, the multi-jurisdictional pursuit, the extradition, represented the system's commitment to making clear that Broadway is not a hunting ground for financial predators. For anyone who has been a victim of financial fraud or identity theft in Nashville, please contact the Metro Nashville Police Department Fraud Unit at 615-862-7594. And please, like this video, share it with someone who visits Nashville. Case 10 is our final case, and it is directly connected to this one. Case 10, Anesha Robinson, 2022, arrested March 2023, Nashville, Tennessee, Lower Broadway, Davidson County, where Case 9 left us with the story of Felicia Anderson and the predatory operation she allegedly ran alongside her partner across Lower Broadway in the summer of 2022. Case 10 brings us to the full portrait of Anesha Robinson, the woman who was identified alongside Anderson in the very first surveillance footage that investigators reviewed, and who would ultimately be the first of the two to face arrest and booking in Nashville. Anesha Robinson was 32 years old at the time of the incidents that landed her in Nashville's criminal court system. Her path through this case follows the same documented facts established in Case 9, but her individual story, the specific charges against her, the circumstances of her apprehension, and her role in the broader pattern of conduct, deserves its own full examination. Robinson was identified on the Murfreesboro Pike Kroger surveillance footage alongside Felicia Anderson, using the bank card stolen from the first victim on May 28, 2022. She appears clearly in that footage, two women at a self-checkout station, using a card that did not belong to either of them, making purchases and withdrawing cash from a stranger's account while that stranger lay sleeping at his short-term rental, not yet aware that his phone and his financial identity had been taken from him during what he believed was a rideshare trip home. That surveillance image became one of the central pieces of evidence in Metro Nashville Police Department's investigation into both women. The clarity of modern retail surveillance technology, capable of capturing high-resolution images even in the variable lighting conditions of a store interior, meant that investigators were able to obtain images detailed enough to make identification possible. Combined with the investigation's other evidentiary components, including the footage from the Edmondson Pike Kroger connected to the June 17 incident, investigators built a case that connected Robinson to the pattern of conduct with documented visual evidence. When Metro Nashville Police Department went public with the arrest warrants in August of 2022, Robinson's photograph was released alongside Anderson's. The public appeal for information about both women's whereabouts generated community response, the kind of response that the Metro Nashville Police Department specifically relies upon when releasing photographs in connection with active warrants, particularly in cases involving individuals who may be mobile across jurisdictions. Robinson's background included the prior Chicago incident, the case referenced in Milwaukee area reporting, in which she, Anderson, and a third individual were accused of a nearly identical operation. That case, in which a young man was lured into a vehicle under the pretense of a rideshare service and then had his property taken, ended with a police pursuit and arrests after an officer directly witnessed the incident unfolding. The existence of that prior documented incident established for Nashville investigators that they were not dealing with first-time, impulsive criminal behavior, but with an established pattern of predatory conduct that had been replicated across multiple cities. The addition of an evading arrest charge to Robinson's Nashville case, alongside the 3 identity theft counts and 3 fraudulent credit card use counts, reflects what happened when law enforcement initially attempted to apprehend her. Evading arrest is a separate criminal offense under Tennessee law, and its inclusion in the charge sheet adds both to the severity of the legal consequences Robinson faced and to the picture of her conduct during the investigative process. Anesha Robinson was apprehended in Nashville on March 18, 2023. Investigators did not need to pursue extradition from another state, as they had with Anderson. Robinson was located within Nashville itself. She was processed and booked into custody, charged with 3 counts of identity theft, 3 counts of fraudulent use of a credit card, and the additional evading arrest charge. Her bond was set at $130,000. a figure that reflects both the seriousness of the charges and the risk assessment that the court made regarding the likelihood of flight, given the prior history of mobility across jurisdictions. As of the documented public record, Robinson's case moved into the Davidson County criminal court process following her arrest, with the charges proceeding through the system toward legal resolution. Taken together, cases 9 and 10, the story of Felicia Anderson and Anesha Robinson represents something that Nashville's law enforcement community, its tourism industry, and its general public have a genuine interest in understanding clearly. Lower Broadway is one of the economic engines of the city. The tourism revenue generated by the millions of visitors who come to Nashville every year supports jobs, businesses, and community services across Davidson County. Predatory criminal operations that specifically target those visitors are not simply individual financial crimes. They are attacks on the broader economic and reputational health of the city. Nashville's response, through the dedicated work of Metro Nashville Police Department's Central Precinct detectives, through the public release of surveillance images, through the pursuit of warrants and extradition across state lines, through the serious charging decisions that treated these cases as the multi-count felony matters they were, reflects a law enforcement posture that takes the safety of every person who walks down Broadway seriously, whether they live in Nashville or are visiting from 1,000 miles away. For every person who visits Nashville's Lower Broadway in the future, and millions more will, because this is one of the great American entertainment destinations, the story of what happened in the summer of 2022 is a reminder that awareness is your first line of defense. Confirm your rideshare driver through your app before you get in. Keep your cards secure throughout the evening. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling. And know that Nashville's law enforcement community is actively watching, actively investigating, and actively prosecuting the people who try to use the city's warmth and hospitality as cover for predatory crime. Both Felicia Anderson and Anesha Robinson faced the full weight of Davidson County's criminal justice system. Both were arrested. Both were charged with serious felonies. The legal process moved forward, and Nashville's Broadway Strip continued doing what it has always done, welcoming the world with live music, open doors, and the irreplaceable spirit of a city that refuses to be defined by the criminal conduct of the few. 10 cases, 10 women, 1 city, and a documentary record that spans from the courtyards of downtown Nashville to the boardrooms of a beloved cancer research foundation. From the online ticket platforms that funded a personal lifestyle instead of cancer treatments, to the Broadway bars where tourists handed their trust and their credit cards to the wrong people. From a federal prison sentence measured in years, to an arrest made just days ago in a case that is still unfolding before a judge right now. These cases are not entertainment. They are education. They are documentation. They are a reminder that financial crime, fraud, and deception do not always look like what we imagine when we picture a criminal. They look like a professional woman with a stack of polished invoices. They look like a person in an unofficial uniform who knows the right streets to name. They look like someone offering a kind gesture on a late-night street in a city full of music and celebration. The victims in every one of these cases were real people, people with families, with savings, with trust that was exploited. Their experiences deserve to be taken seriously, told accurately, and remembered. And the investigators, the prosecutors, the FBI agents, the Secret Service officers, the Metro Nashville Police Department detectives, and the Office of the Inspector General staff who built these cases, often over years, often across multiple jurisdictions, always against individuals who were working hard to stay ahead of accountability, deserve recognition for the work they do to make these outcomes possible. If you or someone you know has been affected by fraud, financial exploitation, or identity theft, please reach out to the Metro Nashville Police Department Fraud Unit at 615-862-7594. The Federal Trade Commission Consumer Fraud Reporting Line at 1-800-CALL-FTC. The National Center for Victims of Crime at 1-800-FYI-CALL. And if you have any information about the whereabouts of Jody Brooke Anderson, missing from Nashville since 2017, please contact Metro Nashville Police at 615-862-8600 or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. Truth matters. Accountability matters. And every person watching this video right now is part of a community that deserves to be informed, protected, and heard. If this documentary meant something to you, if it informed you, if it moved you, if it made you think, please take one moment right now to like this video, leave a comment telling us which case affected you the most, share this with someone in your life. Share it with someone who visits Nashville. Share it with someone who needs to know that the truth is always worth telling. We will see you on the next case, and we are not done yet.